off as or where we started to get to know Bryan through Wine Cellar, through Roland, etc., was as a young gun back in 2011. He's one of our first young guns that made wines under his own label. It was those days, I think you used the name Tobias, and fun wines from family property in the Swartland. He cut his teeth at places like the Saudi family wines, you might have heard of them, in Priorat, and then found yourself in love with Rioja and a Riojan. How do you say it? Riojan. And now you're making fantastic wines around Logroño, based in the northern part of Spain. And Bryan's wines are really about a different take on a very traditional region. And I think we're very excited to have you. It's great to have brought these wines over. I went over to Spain last year and had spent some great times in Logroño myself. Absolutely superb city. If you ever want to visit an incredible wine and food focused place, I mean, you eat so well, you drink so well, and there's a lot of passion, and wine is really central to the culture and the living there, which is something that I will cherish. And now, even in the lockdown era, you know, the energy of people being together over tapas and drinking great wine. Bryan, welcome. Please tell us about yourself. Take us through Rioja through your eyes, and maybe your journey from the Swartland to making cutting-edge Riojan wines.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction and having me. And it's true, yeah, it was great. The energy of Spain, the tapas is basically one of the things that also brought me here. I was talking about that. Thinking about what brought me to Rioja. There's many things that brought me to Rioja, but we'll get onto that now. So basically, I started off I'm from Malmesbury, from the Swartland. My parents got a small farm there. I got grapes, so I had it easy in a way. I had grapes at home, and I studied winemaking, Stellenbosch, and then I started working for the cellar closest to me, which would have been first the Lammershuk and then the Saudi family, and I was spent basically almost 4 harvests with the Saudi family, and 2 at Lammershuk, and then from that I worked in Priorat as well. So I was doing a bit of an exchange with Evan, working in Priorat and working in South Africa, and by pure coincidence I met my now wife in the Swartland. She was working a harvest in Rupert and Rothschild, and basically through common friends we met up. And then with me working in Spain and her working in South Africa, we kind of worked harvest and basically working like migratory workers, working harvest between Spain and South Africa for 2 years. And then that was in 2010. And then 2012 we were deciding what to do. And she said, "Well, come to Rioja and make wine. My father's interested in starting something." And I was like, "Well, sounds like an interesting proposal." And I spent 2012 did a harvest in Rioja, and I spent the whole year in Rioja studying Spanish. At the university in Rioja, and I started learning a bit more of the region, because if you think about Rioja 10 years ago or 8 years ago, even now, you know, you just know the big brands, the big names, and you just know this one style of Rioja, Crianza Reserva and Gran Reserva, those aging styles. And I was like, there's got to be much more to Rioja. You look at the vineyards, you look at the soil, the climate difference, and there's so much diversity within Rioja. And yet the wines you're drinking, that you're finding on basically finding a lot of Riojas in supermarket shelves, and even from the select wine cellars, were either big showy wines or basically very, very much marked by the winemaking technique. And you weren't finding an essence of, there was a missing link between the terroir and the wine. And that's what I saw in 2012. So I thought there is potential here, and it's really a real challenge that I wanted to take on. And then you look at the old vineyards, and you look at the dryland vineyards they still got in Rioja. I mean, there's a lot of dryland vineyards and old vineyards of Grenache, of Tempranillo, white varieties, and even varieties in Rioja and the old vineyards that don't even exist on the catalogue. They're not even allowed to plant in Rioja. So you can imagine the diversity that Rioja's got. And they've been growing grapes here since the Phoenicians. So there's a lot of grape history in Rioja, and that's what I want to tap into, and I wanted to see what it was all about. So we've been running around now for about 7 years, making wine in Rioja, and every year is a learning curve. And we're learning a lot. So we have now we have 6 wines, and each wine tells a story. Comes from or through a variety, or basically just a blend of different soils, or it's a single vineyard. So we work with different wines that can tell a different story, and that's basically what we do in Rioja.
Just give us a bit of a background, if you a quick take on how you would say that Rioja came to have this dual identity of really traditional kind of wines and wines that are really very modern and new world in style. What would, just a few key takeaways from your point of view from being in Rioja, that what shaped that, just to give us a bit of background and depth.
I think there's two sides. There's a lot of influence in Rioja that obviously came after phylloxera, because phylloxera in the turn of the century, at the end of the 1800s, wiped out the whole of Bordeaux, and a lot of the Bordeaux chateaus were buying wine from Rioja in bulk, and using the train station in Aro, which is in the north of Rioja. It's only 4 hours drive from Bordeaux. And they were using that to truck bulk wine up to Bordeaux. And that kind of shaped Rioja, or was kind of the birth of Rioja's commercial wine trade. And then from that, they started bottling wines and aging wines in barrel. So, and then I think maybe the production was there, but the demand dropped as people started planting grafted wines. And I think a lot of the cellars became basically aging houses, the same as what you have in Jerez. So there were big cellars, like the term bodega is a cellar. It's like an underground place where you keep things. So I think that's where the whole thing started. And then they started with the Consejo in 1925. It was the first DOCA of Rioja to produce quality wine. The first DOCA in Spain in 1925, or DOC, and then it became a DOCA. And then it developed on to aging took up more priority in the wine than vineyard or cellar. So you classify the wine quality on the amount of time or the type of aging the wine had in the cellar. So I think all these processes have led to different cellars having different kinds of markets or different kinds of approaches. So you have these very old cellars that are stuck they've kept it as it was, and they still maintain the tradition of small 225 liter barriques. And they make wines, and their wines are good. I mean, you can see what you can do with Rioja when you look at those wines. I mean, those wines they come out after 10, 15 years. They release their Gran Reserva after 20 years, And these kind of wines are amazing. It just shows you the potential for aging that you have in this region. That's another thing that drew me to the region, that you have this beautiful potential. Drink some white wines from 1950 and 1960, and they're still fresh, beautiful. It's something that it's really hard to find in other wine regions in the world. So it's something that's there, and some cellars have stayed there. They've maintained that, and then other cellars have gone more on the modern approach. They've gone more towards the American oak, the smaller barrel, the vanilla. Looking for the vanilla, looking for the sweet aromas of the oak to integrate with the Tempranillo, because then there's also been a shift in the grape varieties planted in Rioja. So a while back, they reckon there was more Grenache. Well, first there was more white grapes in Rioja. Then they started planting red grapes. And then after phylloxera, Grenache started getting planted quite a lot. It was quite resistant to idiom. And then in the 80s, when Rioja started becoming famous for the crianzas, started getting good points, and that everyone started planting Tempranillo because it's got more color and slightly more extract, so you can work with that in barrels and do the aging style on Tempranillo. And Grenache was considered bad quality grape, and Tempranillo was being paid higher prices, so everyone was pulling out their Grenache and planting Tempranillo. And then the problem with Tempranillo is quite a tannic variety. So to deal with that, you put it in small barrels, give it oxygen, and you give it American oak. It makes it sweet and makes it good, and you can sell it after 1 year. So there's a commercial side to Rioja that stick on that formula, and that's the Crianza formula. But then there's an old style, there's an old history in Rioja, and some sellers still keep that alive, which is really great. So
and where do you fit in now? Would you say that you kind of fit in the middle? Were you trying to?
I don't think we even at any of them. So I find that for the style of wine that I make and the wines that I like, I don't like to use small barrels because I find them too dominant on the wines. They mark the wine too much, and you've got to wait too long. If you have a vineyard that can be in a small barrel, you've got to wait almost 6 or 7 years until that wine can be drunk. A good example is the Paradonea of Muga. Really good wine made in small barrels. It's really good wine. I prefer using slightly bigger formats, and I prefer to extract less, and then the wine ages along. There's a slow evolution, but in bottle you have a much more slow evolution. You maintain the fruit in the wine. So I'm looking more at a fruit style of winemaking, but then we're also looking more at the vineyards. So we're looking more at a vineyard approach, because you must remember that's Spain. The plots are in Rioja Alavesa, which is a certain part of Rioja. There where the plot size is less than, the average plot size is about 1/3 of a hectare. So it's very small plots. To have a size of a hectare is very rare. And in the other parts of Rioja, you may see 3 or 4 hectares, but they've all been traditionally a family owned 3 hectares of vineyard in Rioja, and was scattered all over the place. So your plots are small, and that's a very nice way that you can work with one vineyard plot, and you know which vineyard is good. So we're working also with basically with vineyard plots now, and focusing more on the vineyard approach, more of a Burgundian approach than an aging or a blending approach. So we look more at the plots. That's basically where we are. So we're trying to transmit what each plot has to offer. Also marking the wine lesson in the cellar. That's kind of what our approach is.
Are you still discovering new vineyards, and are you planting, or is it
all the time? This doesn't stop.
All the time. So that's one of your big stories, eh?
Yeah.
And give us a bit of an idea of the differences between making wine in the Swartland and getting wine in a bottle and a label in Swartland versus your journey in Spain. I believe
less parties.
Isn't that just when you become older?
We got a bit earlier. No, not really. No, it's very different. First of all, the winemaking is very different. The grapes react differently. We're in a different climate. So first of all, you have to change your chip completely into the winemaking. Like I said, we work in Swartland in a Mediterranean climate, and here we're working in a continental climate. So it's very different. The tannin structure, the soils are different. The soils are a lot younger. And we have a lot more limestone in certain parts of Rioja, which changes the tannin structure of the reds quite a lot. So I had a big learning curve in the beginning with how I make the wines, and then also the bureaucracy in Spain is a lot different. You know, we're coming out of in Spain you've got different communities, so provinces which have their own law. Well, first of all, the municipalities have got their own law. Then you got your province which has your own law. Then you have the Spanish government, and then on top of that, you've got the European Union. So you've got like 5 different laws to get through, and none of them really kind of coincide. They all kind of have their own opinion on what they do. So you have to kind of get through this matrix every time you want to do something. So every time you have to get a permit to do something or permission to do something, or there's a lot of paperwork. So that was different. That I had to learn to do.
And you can't just ignore the rules. You can just you have to kind of abide by them.
No, you get letters, and you get the sanction. You get fined, and they're not small.
I see.
So that was a big difference. What else is different to Swartland? We work yeah.
This kind of segues into the fact that the regulations have changed, and there's some interesting new kind of regulations that came in, I think, in 2018.
Yeah, okay, that's what the DSCA of Rioja, the Consejo Regulador of Rioja.
Yeah.
So what they've done is traditionally they were only qualifying wine on aging in the cellar. So if your wine was not barrel aged in 220, your wine is only allowed to have crianza on the label if it was aged in 225 liter barrels. That's where the whole 225 liter barrel in Rioja has come from. Is the Consejo only qualifies your wine as crianza, reserva, gran reserva, if it's been aged for a certain amount of time in a small barrique. Okay, so Fuda doesn't count, 500 liter doesn't count, only 225s count. So all the cellars that are used 225 liter barrels, it doesn't matter what quality the wood is, as long as the 225. So that's where American oak comes in. Because if you've got American oak barrels, you're buying for half the price and you're saying crianza on the label, it's better quality. So that's what the Rioja was qualifying as quality. And there's been a bit of a revolution, a bit of a revolt, and a lot of sellers, there are small guys, small sellers and family sellers have sort of basically gone against that. Because obviously that protects the big guys. So there's a bit of a revolt. In 2008, the Consejo realized that they're going to have to start doing something, otherwise Rioja is going to split up. There's a lot of friction between the Rioja Alavesa, which is Alava, which is Basque territory, to separate it from Rioja, if Rioja didn't do something. So Rioja then brought in this new regulation. And it's good because now they're actually focusing on terroir, or on geographical indications. So now you have, it's unfortunate that it's not free, because they have to really keep control. So if you have your cellar and your vineyards in the same village, then you can call it the village wine. Unfortunately, you can't call it the village wine if your cellar is in a different village to your vineyards. That's unfortunate. And then the problem with that is that all the cooperatives comply with that. So all the cooperatives can make village wines. And then on the other side, the only thing that I can do, because I've got my cellar in Logroño and I have vineyards all over Rioja. So I work with vineyards basically 100-kilometer radius from our vineyards are, but all within inside Rioja. What I do is I do single vineyards. So I have the vineyards categorized as single vineyard, and to do a single vineyard has to be over 35 years old, has to have special geographical or climatic conditions, and special planting materials or unique planting material. So I've been entering in a single vineyard, so that allows you to put the name of the village on the label, having my Cellar in Rioja, because otherwise the name on the label, you can only put the village of where your cellar is on the label. So it's basically misleading. So on my labels, I have Logroño, which is the village, but my grapes are from La Guardia or from a different village. So the only way that I can put the label of that village on my label is if I register that vineyard as a single vineyard.
And how many single vineyards do you have registered as such?
I only have one, and then I'm going to register another one that I've taken on this year. That's 100 years old.
Oh, super.
So I'm busy, but those are the single plot vineyards that you can register as obviously a single vineyard. Yeah. And so that's the first step basically towards changing. So now if you go into the Consejo's webpage, the DSA's webpage, you can see they make a clear divide between aging characteristics and terroir characteristics, which is a very good start for Rioja. So it's a good, I'm positive. Yeah.
And this kind of suits you really well. This kind of like fits in kind of what you're trying to do to speak.
Exactly.
To make wine speak from a place and from the terroir. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it definitely fits in. Like there's also there are every vineyard and every plot has like a paraje. I'm trying to get the name in English. Basically, you have a plot name. Well, I can go into big detail, but I won't go into big detail. Anyway, it's a very good thing because it means that finally we can start looking at geographic indications inside Rioja. So it's a good step, good start. Because at the end of the day, you know which producer is going to make good wine, and you want to know where the grapes come from. Those are the two main things you want to know about a wine and the vintage. So it's good that we can start putting the name of the village where the grapes come from.
Cool. And then, I mean, maybe it's time for us to start with one of the first wines. Let's, those of you who have the bottles open.
Yeah, we'll start with the Vera. So we talked about starting with this one.
Yeah.
So this is the Laventura Vera. Okay. The green capsule. So Vera, we'll start with Vera. Vera is Macabeo. So it's a grape variety that's grown very much in Spain, in Catalonia, and also in southern France, along the Mediterranean. And also use it in Penedès for cava production. It's different clones they use. So in Rioja, we still have nice old clones with small bunches and a lot of flavor, especially in the old vineyards. And like I was saying, in the early vineyards that are basically between 50 and 60 years old, there was a lot of white grapes planted in those vineyards. So those are the grapes that I go for. I go for the grapes in these, and they planted the white grapes on the parts of the vineyard that were lower yielding because the white grapes would generally produce higher production than the red grapes. So now the vineyards are on 50, 60 years on, they produce very, very high quality. So those are the grapes we are picking to make this wine. So we go through, this is probably made of about 12 plots to make this wine, and it's only $5,000. So we go through and we pick the white grapes. We press them and then it ages in oak. So I use 500-liter barrels and I use foeders for this wine. So I don't try and you keep the oak aging to stabilize the wine, but we don't try and oak the wine. And then again, what's very important about this wine is it's from Rioja Alavesa. Now, Rioja Alavesa is in the northern part. If you look at that, you see La Guardia there. So it's in the northern part of Rioja. Just to put this map is basically La Guardia or Logroño is an hour and 35 minutes from San Sebastian in the north, from the Atlantic Sea. So we're 100 kilometers from the Atlantic. And then in the north, you've got a mountain range called Sierra Cantabria. And the Sierra Cantabria is made up of a lot of limestone. So if I'm going to show you the limestone, if you look here, this is a pure limestone. So these vineyards have about free limestone of about 20%, between 15 and 20%. And the pH of the soils is around 8.2 saturated out. So it's got a very, very high pH. And I really like it for the white wines. It makes really nice white wines. It gives you good palate, good mouthfeel, good texture on the whites. So I really look for the white wines in these soils. And that's the wine. And this wine is really good now. It's very delicate. But this wine with time in bottle ages like year on year, it just gets better. It gets better.
Yeah, one of my favorite wines I think you poured, I went to visit Bryan last year, as I mentioned before, was I think we drank the 2013.
Yeah,
the
the first vintage.
And just brilliant. I think it was just starting to go into a drinking window. So this is a variety with that texture and that kind of detail on the palate is really a food-driven wine and something to look at keeping for a few years if you have the patience.
Definitely. You can drink it now, you can enjoy it now, but keep a few bottles. You'll be surprised. So they really, the tasting notes you can say I put in there. They've got in the beginning it's quite limey, quite citrusy, quite timid, quite shy, and that's why Vera's I think in the end has got a very bad name, bad reputation, because it's not like a Sauvignon Blanc or a Verdejo. It is very easy to make in mass production in stainless steel tanks and then sell after 3 months. It's a wine that needs to be delicate. If you find good grapes, you have to delicately make it in the cellar, and then you need to age it and keep it for a while so that in the bottle it starts developing these secondary and tertiary aromas in the bottle. So in the beginning it's very citric, very limey, and then after bottling you start getting a bit of apple, a bit of pear, a bit of peach, and then with time you start getting the tertiary. You start getting a bit of straw, honeycomb. And then you start getting a bit of like the kerosene characters. So it even starts going like a bit of a Riesling in the end. So it becomes very, very interesting in bottle. Yeah.
It's got a lovely subtone. And I think what's also important, this wine is shy on the nose and it's all about the texture. But it's quite amazing the weight that it has with only 12.5% alcohol. So that's the other refreshing element about it. And then finally, it's got a nice salty, savory element right at the back on the palate as well, which is something I like very much.
That's very, very nice wine for food.
Yeah.
Imagine that with a turbot in San Sebastian on the grill.
That's the way you have it, eh? Yeah, so Rioja is about eating and drinking. Bryan, what's also interesting is that at the moment, planting of white varieties is about less than 10% in Rioja. Is that correct?
It is correct, yeah. On paper, it's about 10 or 15%. But if you look in the vineyards, I think there's more.
Okay.
So, again, what's on paper and what's in the vineyards is a bit different thing. I think there's a bit of white varieties in Rioja in the vineyards, but what's on paper is about 10-15%. I planted this year, I planted a hectare of white, of Euro.
So that was my next question. Is there a bit of a movement to plant a bit more white wine and white varieties?
Not really. Okay. Not really. The people don't really. It's hard to sell a white Rioja for the big guys, So they don't really push to plant white. And then again, like I said to you, the market, a lot of the sellers don't do what we're doing. They want to push a white wine out in 3 months. They want to have it bottled and on the rack and selling within a very short time. So, and then a lot of the sellers that do make white wines, they use the white wine to do a first fill in the barrels. So they'll buy a new oak, they'll use the white wine to do a first fill and ferment the white wine in the barrels, and then they'll use the barrels for the red wine. So white wine's always like the second grade wine. It's never focused as a wine.
Okay, so that's not really your style, eh?
No, not at all. So there's a lot of potential for white wine. I actually even think that Rioja's got more potential for white wine than red wine, in a way.
Well, of my favorite Rioja wines are definitely old, mature white wines. So that's for sure. And that 13 that I have yours, I look forward to see what's going to happen to the 18 and the other vintages. Shall we move on to the next one?
Yeah. Just put the next one at last. So the next one is the Malvasia. I'll wait for the tasting notes. So this is also from Rioja Alavesa in the north on the limestone soils. The vineyard is about 40 years old. Again, it's a one vineyard only because Malvasia is not very common in Rioja. It's very hard to find Malvasia. And Malvasia is actually, this is called Malvasia Riojana. So it's not the same as Malvasia that you find on the coast. It's Malvasia, they call it Malvasia in Rioja. It's actually Alarije. But it's very similar and shares genetic characteristics of Malvasia. And on the palate, you taste the same. The grape looks the same. That's why it's called Malvasia. But this variety's got so much flavor in the skins. The skins really ripen up nicely, and the flavors all in the skins. So when I started to make it, as I did a little bit of skin contact. I did 3 days of skin contact on it, not a lot, just to basically get those kind of extra esters out of the skins, extra flavors out of the skins. And then we age it in cement egg. And also one reason why every wine's got a logistical side to it. I only get 1,000 kilos from the vineyard. So to fill a 700-liter egg, I need to skin contact for a while so I can get enough juice. So there's two reasons why the wine skin contact. But it works really well. And then obviously with the cement egg, you have the egg shape of the cement, you have slow oxidation, and you have a lot of least movement in the egg. So it makes very interesting wine. Also very much a food-driven wine. This wine works really well with chefs. Almost better with chefs than with sommeliers. Sommeliers like it because it's something different. But when you give this to a chef, he's like, I've been looking for that. I know what plate I'm going to have with that. So it's really a great food wine because you have this texture, this volume, low alcohol, and then a good pH and acidity as well. So it's a very nice food wine.
We had a quick question there. How long would you age these white wines of yours for, would you say?
As long as you want to.
So 5 years peaking and drink them over 20 years.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you can drink them straight. You can drink them after 1 year, but you're missing out. So I think after 5 years they're really looking good. 10 years they're going to be showing aging. It depends if you like aging on white wines. If you like aging on white wines, they can go 10, 20 years. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, no, I look forward to, especially the Vero. I'm going to put some of that away, I think.
on the tasting note on the Malvasia, you can see that I've put in that there's something that I really like about it. It's got more of a grapefruit character. There's again the limey citrus notes, but there's more grapefruit and skin, like the skin of a grapefruit. And then there's apple as well, like baked apple, like oxidative aroma, and then quince. There's a little quince on the nose as well, in the mouth, that I like. So it's a different aromatic profile to the Vero. It's not subtle, but different. I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's got some floral notes as well, and it's got this really lovely flavor. You know, coated acidity. I like that word, coated acidity. But you know, with acidity's got nice fruit flavors to it, and the quince comes through onto the palate.
Yeah.
Delicious wines, food wines, people. I mean, this is crucial that one understands us as well. That this one there's a lot of places for wines like these, and they're unique.
Not swimming pool and ice bucket.
No swimming pool, no ice buckets, no ice in.
No ice in the glass either. But we move to the next one. So we'll do the blend, the red blend, called La Nave now. So I'm going to go into the three main soil types we have in Rioja now, and we work in. You can see three places where this wine comes from. So I work now with the whole of. So our cellar is in Logroño in the middle, and then this one I make from grapes from La Guardia, Cárdenas, which is basically red soils, and Tuerlilla, which is in the bottom, Rioja Oriental, which is Rioja Baja. They changed the name to Rioja Oriental 2 years ago. And that's basically just round rocky boulders, alluvial boulders. So if I'm going to give you a look, again, the limestone soil is what we had in the white wines. So it's like these. Okay, that's the parent rock, it's basically 100 million years old. And then we've got if you look at Nájera, Cárdenas, these are soils like this. It's basically red sandstone. And these are about 150 million years old. And these form part of the central Spanish plateau, so all the way to Madrid, for the whole Spanish plateau. And then in certain parts of Rioja, you obviously have the Ebro, which is the river that goes all the way down Rioja to the Mediterranean. There we have a lot of alluvial movement as well from glacial and river activity. And then in where the Grenache is from, it's basically from round rocky soils, which is basically like this, just rocks. There's no sand. You can't even walk on the rocks. These are small ones. Huh? Is that to look for? The other most of the rocks are basically size like that size of my head. So that's where the Grenache is planted, and there's 60 to 80-year-old Grenache in this village still. Really amazing stuff that you can't believe you can still find that in Rioja. So we're going to taste La Nave now. It's a blend of grapes from these three different regions, and I'm using basically Grenache, Carignan, and Tempranillo. So all three varieties have got a lot of history in Rioja, a lot of heritage in Rioja. And each variety brings something special to the blend. So your Carignan will bring a bit of acidity, a bit of color as well. The Grenache will give you freshness, fruit, also maintain good acidity and pH, a bit of alcohol as well. The Carignan brings the alcohol down. And then the Tempranillo brings a bit of mid palate, a bit of body, a bit of structure to the wine. So in the end, you make a fantastic blend. And Rioja, this is what made Rioja. Rioja is a combination of different regions. They put together in 1925 in the DOC of Rioja, and that's because they were blending with varieties from all of these different places in Rioja to make good wines. So your first wines that are made in Rioja were wines made by grape growers who then aged their wines in cement tanks, and then you got the negociants that came along and bought the bulk and then aged it in barrels or bottled it and sold it as wine. So those are the beginnings of Rioja, were wines made by grape growers. We didn't even have these stemmers. So some of your great wines, the 60s and the 50s and the 40s of Rioja, are made by grape growers in cement tanks, stepping on the grapes. And then and then the great winemakers, the guys that saw the potential of these wines, bought them up and blended them, and then sold them as the great trademarks and the great wines that we know of Rioja. And that's how Rioja started. And this is what started me on the whole trend of this wine. Was look for the good parts in the good villages and blend it and make a blended wine of Rioja. And why it works is because Rioja is so diverse. If you look at the map, if you go down to the southeast part of Rioja and the northwestern part of Rioja, there's 10 degrees difference in summer. And also the soils, I'll just tell you what the soil differences now. So between these climatic differences in the valleys that you have in Rioja, there's amazing diversity in Rioja. So in a cold year, you want to have more Grenache from the south. In a warm year, you want to have more Tempranillo from the north. You know, so you play with different regions on how you make your blend and how you make good wines, consistent wines in Rioja. And that's how the big cellars have been doing it ever since.
And where does the name come from? How did you decide on
La Nave? Well, La Nave is actually a ship. A nave is like a ship or it's actually an open space, or it's a spaceship, or even especially an open space, even a place in the chapel is called a nave. But we came along as basically like an adventure. It's a ship, and it's kind of like L'Aventura, fits along with adventure and venture, but it's not L'Aventura. It's La Nave. It's a little baby, a baby adventure. And as you can see on the label, we have a little ship, a little boat, going up and down you see that, up and down the waves. And the waves are basically the bureaucracy.
a bit of fun.
Yeah, a little bit of fun. Yeah, and that's basically that's La Nave. So I think it's a very good, well balanced, kind of everyday wine. If I was to explain, it's like a dolcetto from Rioja, but it's a blend of 3 different varieties.
But it's got a nice kind of serious. It's got a bit of crispy tannins to it still. You know, so it's almost like it needs a day. You know, probably needs another 6 months for it to really become smashable.
Yeah.
But it's got the delicious purity to it. I mean, that's the one thing that screams from the glass. Is just this great purity. And maybe that's a good question to ask you now. What were the vintages like? You know, what's 18 like as a vintage? And 18, and the whites were 18s as well.
18 as well. Yeah. 18 was a good vintage. We had a lot of rain in June and July for 4 weeks. So basically now we had quite a lot of rain in 18. So which made it a bit difficult for disease pressure. But what it did was that it made the wines quite more fruit forward. So we got bigger berries, slightly bigger crops in the vineyard, not excessively big, but instead of 4 tons, 6 tons maybe, or 5 tons. But there was definitely more fruit on the wines, and I found the wines almost easier to make. 2017, we'll taste Tempranillo as 2017, we'll taste that in two wines time. That year we had a lot of frost damage, and then it was also dry. So on top of having frost damage in early spring, it was a very dry year. So you had a little amount of crop on the vineyards from the frost damage, and then you had also a very dry year. And you'll see there's a bit more concentration on the wine. That wine will take a lot longer to ease out and soften out over time. So there's a big difference in vintages in Rioja.
And do you have like a vintage classification, like a Muy Bueno or
we do.
Excelente? Is that still in use?
Every year is Muy Bueno.
And when does Excelente happen? Is that lower down the tier?
It happens once in a while, but Muy Bueno is every year. You can have 70% hail, you'll have Muy Bueno. You can have... So the Consejo, they just say very good to sell wine. Yeah. So you can't really back on that. But we do have a lot of vintage different. Also depends on where your vineyards are. So it's very localized where you have frost, where you have, and there's some vineyards that work well in dry years. Some vineyards work better in wetter years. We generally, because our vineyards are lower yielding and older vines, I generally have better wines in the wetter years than in the dry years, because otherwise the vines, you know, I don't have too much production so on my wines. So if it's a wet year, it doesn't affect me like other vineyards. So guys that are normally run around 6 tons a hectare, in a wet year, they don't get ripe or they have too much rot. Where we're running around 3 to 4 tons a hectare. So in a wet year, we sit at 4.5, maybe 4.8 tons. So we very much in a balance.
And those are the two things you didn't get when you were at the Swartland. You didn't get any hail and didn't get any frost.
Nothing. It was just maybe dry or very dry.
So that's a lovely one. Crunchy, fresh, bright. I can't wait to drink it in 6 months' time when we're in summer. Where this kind of style is almost like better suited to a little bit of a milder climate versus it's really cold in Cape Town at the moment. So that's where we're at. So great. Those of you in Spain, enjoy the summer. We're looking forward to this.
Yeah. So we'll go on to the Grenache. Waiting for time.
Good.
The aging. This wine is aged in cement, not aged in barrel.
And that's where that verve and energy comes from. You know, it's got this really kind of like crunchy, fresh, and it's just grape tannin.
Yeah, so there's no oak on the wine. So it's nice to drink a Rioja with no oak. You can see the quality. So we're gonna go on to the Grenache. Now, this is what I was talking about, the Grenache on these rocky soils. Basically, you know, the vines are like, there's not even the weeds get a chance to grow in these rocks. So it's just rocks. And it's kind of like what you'd expect in Châteauneuf-du-Pape or in Southern Rhone, those kind of soils that you have. And you have these old bush vine Grenache vineyards. And like I said, this wine I make from a 60-year-old vineyard and an 80-year-old vineyard. And in the 80-year-old vineyard, there's different kinds of Grenache. There's Grenache Gris, there's Grenache Blanc, there's dark Grenache, and there's like a kind of a lighter Grenache, a redder Grenache. So there's a lot of genetic diversity in the old 80-year-old Grenache block, which is very interesting. And it's one of the reasons why they think that Rioja is one of the northern Spain is the beginning of Grenache, or the birthplace of Grenache, is because Spain has the highest amount of genetic variance of Grenache than any other country. So you definitely see that in the old vineyards of Rioja still. So it's really nice to work with this Grenache.
I remember, I think we visited one of these vineyards or a few of these last year. It's how beautiful. I mean, they're really high up. There's great elevation, but also they're gnarly, but they're healthy. They look like they've got a vibrance to them, even though they're obviously really nice old vineyards.
Yeah.
And
they've
got so much energy about them.
Yeah. No, this vineyard last year in 2019, I had to pick it because the alcohol was just going through the roof. It was 80 years. It's 80 years old. It was pushing 16 degrees alcohol 2 weeks before it should have. The leaves are green. There's a lot of foliage, a lot of branches, and it was amazing to see how well it is in its element. Yeah. So that was really nice to see, and the wines are beautiful. So with the altitude, the vineyards run from 350 meters to 700 meters in Rioja. And these vines are about 630 meters. So they're at the top limits of where you can grow vineyards. So if you go any higher, you have in the cold years your grapes won't get ripe, or you just during flowering you won't have any flower, won't have any set. And that's one of the reasons why Grenache is ripped up as well, because during spring you can have bad fruit set. So you can have 1 year with 6 tons or 8 tons a hectare, and the next year you can have 1 ton or 2 tons a hectare because you have very bad flowering and bad fruit set. It's one of the reasons why the farmers started pulling out Grenache and planting Tempranillo as well, because Tempranillo has a very much more consistent flowering phase than Grenache. So that's one of the downfalls of Grenache. But again, this wine, you don't need to add acid, you don't need to do anything to it. It just comes in as it is. The pHs are beautiful. It does malolactic. It takes a while to do malolactic. This is what I think helps with a bit of the aromatics and develop it, to do malo over 7 months. And then in bottle, it's a beautiful one. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of purity, a lot of dark, deep fruit, florals, and youthful. youthful, vivacious, and then lovely texture. The Grenache sweetness that will be tempered as it matures.
Yeah, there's not too much sweetness, not too much of that candy fruit, which I like. It's more red fruit, more cherry, and then there's a little bit of tannin there, but that's all leaf stem. There's no whole bunch. So there's a little bit of greenness there that I like. But I think this wine will age beautifully. The first year I made it was in 16. I gave you guys some bottle of 16th, I think you tried. And you can see how the evolution curve is also very, very, very interesting on this wine. So yeah.
I also like that counterbalance of the bit of greenness to the red cherry, to the brightness of the red fruit. It's just poised.
Yeah.
I hope you guys are enjoying it. I hope everybody's finishing their bottles as they go along. If you pick 4 or 5, I recommend you try and keep them over for 3 days or so and try them with some food and give them all kinds of hard work, because these wines are made seriously and for serious consumption. So they're good to dig into. I mean, yeah. So far, so good. I'm happy.
Yeah.
Hope you guys are happy.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Tempranillo.
Right, we're going to have Tempranillo. Have we had the questions going past? I haven't seen the questions go past yet. I'm not sure if we had them.
No, the questions are going. Grenache is
Okay.
fantastic, is the one comment here, and we've had some nice.
So we're going to go on to Tempranillo, the star of Rioja. So Tempranillo is now one of the most planted red varieties in Rioja, but before it wasn't. Its origin is northern Spain. So I reckon Rioja is one of the origins of Tempranillo. That's why I work with it. And what was I going to say? Again, a very difficult grape to get to know. In the beginning, it reminded me of Pinotage.
No, come on, Brian. What's
Really?
that about? So I mean, one of your commentaries on Tempranillo is that it's got these really interesting tannins, and tannins are important to you when it comes to how you make Tempranillo.
For sure. But a good Pinotage too. Yeah? No, Tempranillo is a small berry, thick-skinned grape that ripens early. So it's got certain things in comparison physically with Pinotage. That's what reminds me of Pinotage. But it's completely different. But here in Rioja, we have the climate for Tempranillo. That's why I wanted to make it. So we have this cool. We only have a warm, basically July and August are warm. And warm, we talk about 35 degrees. Not talking 45, 47 degrees. And then in August, it flattens off and the evenings are cold. You need a jacket in the evening. So there's enough warmth, enough heat to ripen the variety, but not enough to stress it. So Tempranillo is very sensitive to water stress. So the great thing is you get a great amount of sunlight to ripen to get tannin maturity, but also you don't get too much of the drought stress. So it's a fantastic place to grow Tempranillo, Rioja. And that's why I want to take on the challenge to make Tempranillo. So first of all, you got to work the vineyards really, really well. You have to. It's very sensitive to downy mildew. It's very sensitive to powdery mildew. It's very sensitive to shoot breakage. So it's quite a sensitive grape and vine in the vineyard that you need to work well. And then also it has a very high pH if you don't work it well. If you stress it up too much, you have a high pH. So you need to work, not crop too much, and you need to work a lot in the vineyard. If you've got a good grape in the cellar, you can make fantastic wines with Tempranillo. The other thing that Tempranillo has this beautiful ageability. It has this beautiful depth and without going too far, without having to let it mature or get too ripe on the vineyard, you can get this beautiful depth, this beautiful black red fruit mix on the wine. It's really a great wine. I think Tempranillo as a variety is very misunderstood because a lot of Tempranillos out there are either made very commercially or made a lot of wood or made from badly grown grapes. But we're trying our best to do our best with grapes from Rioja Alavesa, which is I think is a very nice part of Rioja to grow Tempranillo. It's a cooler part of Rioja, and it's on the limestone soil. So again, you get this concentration of tannin that's really, really interesting to work with. The different ways of working with is to soften tannin. The book says you must rack the wine, give it oxygen during pump overs, during fermentation, and then go into smaller oak barrels so that you get oxidation throughout the aging or micro-ox the wines. so that you can soften the tannin. My approach is different. I like to put it longer macerations, less oxygen, even punch downs, and then bigger barrels, because it's got a very delicate fruit. So if you oxidize it too much, then you lose the fruit. And if you lose the fruit in a wine, you lose the essence of a wine, for me. So I like to let it age slowly. We're using bigger barrels, 3 liters, 500 liters, depending on the vineyard size, what we can fill. And then it goes for 1 year, or depending on the wine, 2 years in barrel, and then it goes in bottle, ages in bottle again. So this wine has now been in barrel for 1 year, 500 liters, and then it's been in bottle for almost 1.5 years now. And it's starting to round off now. And show, but this one is a wine. This is a wine you can keep for 10, 12, 15 years as well. Yeah.
I mean, what's amazing is we often think of Tempranillo as quite a soft wine. Obviously, we all have that kind of vanilla American oak kind of relation or memory of it as well. What's great in this wine is that you've got a bit of the tension that the tannin brings to balance that red fruit. You know, there's a nice nervousness in the wine, which I think is what you're celebrating. So the fruit is carried by a central nervy tannin, which makes it exciting and gives it life.
For sure. Now, if you think of Spanish Tempranillo, you think of Tempranillos made in the warmer regions of Spain. If someone puts a Spanish Tempranillo on your restaurant table, you're going to think, oh dear, this is going to be a 16.5 degree alcohol black tarry soup. And Tempranillo can do that, but if you're doing in the cooler regions and you're working well with the vineyard, you can make a very serious, a very delicate, elegant Tempranillo, which is what we're trying to make. And I think it's a good example of Tempranillo. And every year we're getting more and more as we get our own vineyards and moving on to it. And I start to get to know the variety a bit better. And I'm starting to enjoy the variety a lot more. Year on year.
That's very good news. That's good to know. It would be a bit challenging if we weren't, I mean, but this wine is really young, vibrant. I mean, the first time we opened it without checking it the next day, I mean, on opening, it's full of verve and it's full of tension and it's lively and crunchy, but certainly screams to be left in the cellar for another 5 years before we start looking at what's going on.
Sure. No, you can leave this wine for good, and it'll surprise you.
And tell me, do you think every vintage so far that you produced is better, or have you had vintages that you thought performed better? I mean, because you've got that dual thing going on, learning about your vineyards and new varieties and vintages.
I think we're getting better every year. Okay. We're still on a learning curve. So we're still on a learning curve, but we're getting better every year on year. And you know, the beginnings are very difficult. You're starting out with, we didn't have vineyards, we didn't have a cellar, we didn't have anything, and we started out nothing. So as we started on, we're starting to get more vineyards, we're starting to get more machinery, we're starting to get more organized, starting to get a bit more respect in the region as well, which counts for a lot. So there's a lot of things are on a good path. Yeah.
No, that sounds like hard work, eh? I mean, it's a journey, L'Aventura.
L'Aventura. So we haven't talked about L'Aventura. So L'Aventura, one thing, L'Aventura is the label, is a combination of adventure and venture. So this is L'Aventura. So venture is luck and actual financial gain, like a venture. And then adventure is risk, but risk with reward. So the whole thing behind L'Aventura is risk with no pain, no gain, risk with reward. And there's a famous Spanish writer who wrote "Quien no se aventura, no aventura," who means who has never ventured will never gain. And that was written in 18 something. So, and he says, and it's L'Aventura. So we took on that on the label. Yeah. That was the L'Aventura. So we started off the company as L'Aventura, but last year, 2 years ago, because we started getting more and more property, more vineyards, we decided to change the name to MacRobert and Canals. So the company is now called MacRobert and Canals. Canals is my father-in-law, my wife. So we now are MacRobert and Canals, which is not easy because every day you try and tell someone your company name in Spain, you're like, Mac, what?
How do we pronounce that? What part do we drop? No. Shall we end with the story about your single vineyard? Tell us about the Del Sanjin.
Yeah, we'll start the single vineyard. So we started making a single vineyard. We bought the vineyard in 2015. So it was our first vineyard that we bought. Yeah. In 2015, 1.3 hectares in La Guardia, and I couldn't believe it. We found the vineyard through a contact in La Guardia. My father-in-law worked there in the 80s, and he was someone that and there was a guy who was retiring, and he had the whole vineyard his whole life, and he wanted to sell the vineyard, and none of the farmers wanted to buy the vineyard because the vineyard was so narrowly planted that the guys couldn't get the tractors into it. So obviously they were like, no, this vineyard's to rip out and to replant. Another important thing about Rioja is that about 70% of the grapes are bought and sold in Rioja. So and to about 10 big sellers. So there's a lot of sale of grapes, and the vigneron, the guy who grows his grapes and makes his wine, there's a big gap in Rioja for that. It's starting now. The young guys are starting. So we'll see a big renaissance or revolution happening in Rioja in the next 10, 20 years time. I'm dead sure of it.
But you know how revolutions work, so I mean that's
yeah, we know that it works. Yeah,
you're the old gun over there now when it comes to. They're looking to you, I hope.
No, we know, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we'll see a big something interesting coming out of Rioja in the next couple of years. And this vineyard we kind of stumbled upon, and I couldn't believe it. So it was planted in 1935, or it's registered in 1935. I mean, it was planted before. So these kind of vineyards are the first vineyards they planted after phylloxera. With planting material they would have got either from Toro, which is a sandy region in northwestern Spain, where they still have vines planted without rootstock, and they would have brought Tempranillo from there, called Tinto de Toro. It's different clones of Tempranillo that generally have in Rioja today, and also they would have brought Grenache from Aragon. So in the old vineyards, you have Grenache, you have Tempranillo, you have Graciano, you have Viura, you have Malvasia, you have Carignan. You have a mix of different varieties. You have varieties that aren't even classified in Rioja in the old vines. And that's what makes them so special. And then the planting density is 5,000 vines a hectare. So it's planted 1.4 meters by 1.4 meters. So perfect planting density for ploughing with animals. Because we had a guy that comes to plough for us. He's like, this vineyard's perfect for ploughing because he only does 4 passes in each row. Now it's important because the guys then started planting 1.8. Which they call the Marco Francese, the French planting. And at 1.8, he has to do 5 passes, which then puts him out. So when you're doing 4 passes, because when you're plowing with a horse, you plow with a mobile plow. So it's a plow like this, you know. And you're either throwing the soil onto the vine or away from the vine. So when you're doing 4 passes, you throw onto the vine, and then you take the middle one, you throw back onto the vine. You come back and you throw onto the vine and then onto the vine. And you basically leave like a V in the middle and all the sand on the vine. And then when you go to 5 passes, like you don't know where to throw the soil on the next pass because it's going to create problems for you in spring when you got to throw it the other way, when you got to plow the other way. So he was like, this vineyard is planted for animals, and it's obvious. It was planted in 1935. I mean, they didn't even know what tractors were in 1935. So it's a living history, this vineyard, and then it's got fruit trees and stone buildings and a stone wall all around it. It's really special. So
it's really beautiful. I mean, I was again fortunate to be there, and I mean, it has a whole kind of semi-ecosystem. You know, there's a way that you live there. You know, there's a little place to hide away from the thunderstorm, and there's a place to have your lunch, and there's some fruit, and it's all something really special and interactive and self-contained almost.
Like permaculture, before you even it was really cool. I mean, you have fruit from cherries in early spring to right till the end, pears, apples in the end of winter, beginning of winter. So, you know, we got cherries, apricots, figs, peaches.
So guys, this wine this is a snapshot of how history worked. You know, a beautiful old place of how people lived, how things were interconnected, and how everything sat together. And I think as a vineyard, it almost captures your story about what Bryan MacRobert has found in Rioja and what the La Ventura is starting to pay off, risk and reward. And I think if we've got very few of these that you've sent in to us. I mean, it's quite highly rated. You can see the ratings on the website, etc. But the single vineyard, seek it out, grab a few bottles. But again, this is a wine that really needs to be drunk seriously. It's something that you need to open and drink over 2 or 3 days, or leave in your cellar for 5 years and start engaging with it.
Yeah, definitely leave that wine for some time.
Yeah. Bryan, any closing comments from you? I mean, any takeaways? Are there, should we send more South African winemakers to Rioja to help grow this revolution?
You're welcome. Welcome to come and spend some time. No, for sure. There's a lot to do, but there's a lot to do in many places, and it's been very interesting to be here and to grow. We'll start a company from scratch. So for me, it's been very much a challenge, and it's something that's been good. We're starting to see the rewards slowly now. I think it takes 10 years to first start seeing your first actual progress, not even a reward. And then as things go on, it starts getting better and better. But yeah, we're moving forward, and it's fun. Just to enjoy.
That's amazing. I mean,
yeah,
we are very excited and grateful that we can bring your wines to South Africa and tell the story. And it's a pity that we had lockdown and all these other shenanigans going on. We didn't even mention that tonight, which is great. But otherwise, Bryan would have been here in the flesh, and I'm sure we'll do some of those in the future. Are there any questions that guys desperately need answered? I think we're all okay. So thank you very much. Look out for our other chats about it. Bryan, we see you in South Africa soon enough. And
we'll see you soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I think that is over and out. Don't drink all 5 bottles at the same time, guys.
Buy more.
Buy more. Keep it safe.